All right, everybody. It's just now 3:30, and I know people will be joining us as I get started, but I want to be respectful of your time. I'm delighted that you could join us this afternoon, this windy afternoon, at least where I am, out Palm Desert Way. And the title of today's webinar is Arts and the Acronyms, and I had been thinking about this for quite some time because we have so many words floating around in acronyms in education, and sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming. And I never wanted to be the person who admitted I didn't know what they were exactly or needed to learn more about them. So I'm going to be talking about them in a way that they are very usable in your daily work and to demystify them and have some practical applications. So if you don't know me or we haven't met yet, although I do see a lot of friends on this afternoon, my name is Louisa Higgins and I'm the Arts Administrator for Riverside County Office of Education. And prior to working in the arts, I had 14 years in the elementary classroom. And then I've spent about equal the time in arts administration. And so there's two things you should know about me. One is that I love all of the art forms. I'm so thrilled every day to be working in the arts. And I also like what's practical and usable because, for many people in the audience that are teachers in the classroom, boots on the ground, you're doing the work every day with students. And so I want to give you things that you can use and that are helpful. So as I mentioned, there's a lot of educational buzzwords. They're always changing. And so I kind of thought about the three that I hear repeatedly and that I know we can use in the arts very successfully. And so that's how I framed up this talk. What are those pedagogies and how do those connect with the arts in a real way that we can use every day? And so I don't want to make assumptions about people's knowledge on any of the given pedagogies. And so we'll review a little bit of if you've been through one of my presentations before, we'll review the artistic processes, and then we'll move into the pedagogies, give examples, and several lessons at the end. So we're trying to figure out how does this all relate to what we teach. So when you talk about the arts, it's any number of things. It's a group of activities that are done with skill and imagination. So we'll start there. That's our definition for the arts. And then these are the three pedagogies that I'd like to talk with you about today. So there's SEL, which stands for social and emotional learning. There is CRT, can be phrased a couple of different ways, but basically culturally relevant teaching. And then there's UDL, Universal Design for Learning. So those are the three acronyms that we're working with. So just to back up a bit and talk about the standards, they're not quite new. I was used to talking about them being our new standards. They're a couple of years old at this point, but we adopted them in 2019. And they're comprised of 4 major artistic processes and 11 anchor standards. And so we'll refer back to those processes as we're looking at things through the lens of the acronyms. So let's just go ahead and review those before we get going. So the first one is creating. I think it's the most easy to understand. And so it's when you're getting ready to do artworks, you're conceiving and developing new arts ideas and your work. And it has 3 anchor standards. So, and you'll see some of the language repeats itself as you move through the processes. So generate and conceptualize, organize and develop, refine, and I've got to make my window a little bit smaller. There we go, refine and complete. The second artistic process, the 3 Ps, performing, presenting, producing. And so that's depending on whether it's dance, music, theater, or media arts. So this is artists actually doing or making their art. Again, very easy to understand. It has 3 anchor standards as well. So we have analyze, interpret, and select. Develop and refine, you see some of that language being used again. And then conveying meaning through the presentation of the artwork. Then we move into responding, which I really appreciate this process so much because it's understanding and evaluating the meaning that's conveyed through the arts. And so I have in red audience reacting to the art. So that's like my shorthand for this one. And the anchor standards for that, for responding, perceive and analyze, interpret, and trying to figure out the meaning, and then applying criteria. So that's something new that we haven't seen. And then the fourth process is connecting, relating artistic ideas with our personal meaning and the external context, excuse me. So the shorthand is the artist and the audience connecting to the art with their own experiences. And so you'll forgive me if I've gone over that a few times in prior presentations, But I've heard it said it takes 10 times for something to really sink in, and then you have that really comfortable working knowledge. So that's the 4 artistic processes and their anchor standards. And I'm sorry, I jumped ahead. So the anchor standards for connecting, synthesizing, and relating knowledge and personal experiences. And then you have the piece that's going to relate a lot to CRT, is relating artistic ideas with societal, cultural, and historical context. So jumping into the first acronym, SEL, which stands for Social and Emotional Learning. And I've really worked with this a lot the past year, really come to understand and appreciate just how important it is. And I think most people would agree now more than ever, when the focus is on mental health and well-being, that social and emotional as a part of what we do as teachers of the arts is incredibly important. So reviewing these, there's 5 capacities. The first one, self-awareness, and it's just like what you would think, just kind of knowing who you are, what you're good at, what influences your behavior. And in that self-knowledge, feeling confident and feeling the ability to grow and develop. And that's important for all ages. So I think it's neat as an adult learner to really grasp these capacities and use them in our own lives. And the second one has to do with self too, self-management. So if you have good knowledge about yourself, then you can say, oh, okay, I know what my triggers are, I know what things make me happy, and therefore I can control my impulses and work more effectively to achieve goals because I have a good handle on who I am as a person, what works for me, what doesn't work for me. And then we get into social awareness, the capacity that has to do with other people. So empathy, I think, is a key point here, understanding other diverse backgrounds and cultures, and you'll see how that fits in with culturally relevant teaching. And it helps us work within our family, school, and community. The second one that has to do with other people is relationship skills. So the ability to maintain and develop healthy and rewarding skills. Relationships with people. And so, that's students dealing with peer pressure and conflict and knowing when to ask for help. So that's a further development of how you relate to other people. And then finally, and I think of this, it's not quite a culmination, but it involves the other 4, is responsible decision making. So if you have a really firm grasp of who you are as a person, and you understand other people as well and what their needs are, then when you're making decisions, you're going to take all of that into consideration and have a very thoughtful decision-making process. So that's the final one, the 5th one, responsible decision-making. And an interesting thing that happened is along the way, New Jersey decided, hey, how can we have these work with each other? And this is a screenshot from their page, and the link is there, and Jessica can put it in the chat. So if you look on the left side, it has the social and emotional learning competencies, the 5 that we just went through. And then across the top, it has the artistic process. So if you were to click on one, it would line up the 2 parts and show you how they work together. And so we're going to do that just now with some examples. So this one, example 1, is creating put together with the SEL competency of self-awareness. So if you look at the standards for creating, the EU, or Enduring Understanding, talks about when you're refining artwork, it's a process that takes time and you need self-confidence to do that. And the EQ, under creating, is how does self-confidence in handling daily tasks help you to refine artwork. And then if you go into the SEL capacity for self-awareness, there we see it again, that mention of self-confidence in handling daily tasks and challenges. So you can see the overlap there between creating and self-awareness involves self-confidence and self-knowledge. So it's how they are interplayed together. A second example, if we take perform, present, and produce, and we align that with self-management, how do they work together? So from those standards, one of the EUs is talking about artists developing strategies to develop skills and behaviors that help them to achieve goals. So I underline that. And in the EQ, talking again about strategies. And then when you go into the SEL capacities for self-management, it talks about finding ways to persevere, overcome barriers, alternative methods to achieve one's goals. So you see both of them are looking at what are the skills and behaviors, and then the goal is to achieve the goal is to achieve goals. Anyway, they both are working towards achieving goals. So that is how perform, present, and produce work together with the social and emotional skill of self-management. And example 3, the artistic process of responding and relationship skills. So from the standards about responding, and EU talks about how artists use feedback and critique from artwork. And an EQ, an essential question, how do artists communicate intent to engage the audience and provoke conversations? And then when you get into SEL capacities around relationship skills, you look at the underlying piece there, talking about positive communication and social skills. So the artist is not existing in a vacuum. They are interacting, they're communicating intent, and there's conversation. So that is how responding to artwork and relationship skills are working together. And I'm going to just throw in, as we go along, examples of how we've done at RCO VAPA, although there's many others out there. But there's a set of sample art lessons that are done around social and emotional learning, and those are free, and you can view them on our website. I'm sure Jessica will put that chat or that link in the chat. So in summary, I want you to think as SEL as a lens when we're making instructional choices. So the key points are that we're really trying to engage students' feelings and emotions as they're creating artworks. And then we're also using art as a way to relate and connect to others. So that is how social and emotional learning connects with the work we're doing as arts teachers. And when we get a little further along the presentation, you'll see some example lessons that show how that comes together. So again, we're not going to throw everything out that we've been doing up to this point, but we're going to incorporate that lens, and it's going to be front of mind when we're making plans. So I want you to take 1 minute and think about what you just heard so far about social and emotional learning. And don't just type it in, but don't press enter. Take 1 minute and share one way that you believe you currently engage your students via social and emotional learning. And then when I ask you to hit enter, let's put our comments in the chat. Okay, so let's just give that 1 minute. I'll set my timer. Okay. And for those of you that are administrators, you could put one program that you oversee that you know uses social and emotional learning. Okay, 10 seconds. Oops, I stopped it right as it was going to go up. Okay, so that's 1 minute. Go ahead and press send, please, and let's share. Okay. Let's see. I have a couple of great shares here. Let me just scroll back up. Feedback and positive comments. Lady Lee, document today. Yes, Greg has a fabulous program in Moreno Valley focused on social and emotional. Would you rather questions, how they're feeling, check-ins. Yes, excellent. I got that one. Jennifer, create considering all levels of their work, making art that contains something all the students can be part of. Great. Lizzie plays a lot of name singing games. Okay, to personalize. Yes. Excellent. Gina uses body mapping to show where feelings are in your body. That's really interesting. Where do you find happiness, or where do you feel happiness? That's really neat. I haven't heard that one before. Meditative art therapy lessons. Wow. Susan says relating color and line to emotion and feelings. Phyllis does mindfulness. Mrs. Houston check-in conversations. Great. Anthony, feedback project surveys. Collaborative art projects from Kevin. Great stuff here. Dan, having students give each other positive feedback. Yeah, excellent. Okay, so definitely that's happening out in your world. And I'm glad to read those examples and be fun to scroll back and look at those a little later on. Okay, so moving on to our next acronym, CRT. So culturally relevant teaching or responsive teaching is a pedagogy, and it has to do with teachers displaying cultural competence. So teaching cross-culturally or multiculturally, and using this method to encourage students. And so there's a couple real giants in this field. This is one of them, Zaretta Hammond. And there's a quote by her on the right. And really what I want you to zero in on is she was really concerned with improving brain power and information processing, that we were going to use cultural relevance to really fire up teaching and learning and make it super effective. And the other giant in this field is Gloria Ladson-Billings. And she got tired of hearing about what was wrong with Black students and started asking what is right with them. And so her three aspects of her pedagogy are student learning, cultural competence, and socio-political consciousness. So to get into that, student learning, she was after demonstrable growth. Boy, I'm tongue-tied. Demonstrable growth. So her focus is on academic mastery. So she wants students to do well and to really be pushed to be their best. Cultural competence. She wanted students and teachers to be fluent in at least one more culture. So we weren't just set on one culture that was the teachers or the students, that were multicultural. And then she talks about socio-political consciousness. And I find this really interesting. Instead of just the what, the who, when, how, and why. Because if we've really done our job as teachers, then our students take the school knowledge and they're able to problem solve in the larger world. And that's really what we want for all our students. So I have, after reading several books about this and studying it, I've come up with my own way of framing this up. And it's that if we have respect for our students and build rapport, then we are able to demand rigor. So again, we're after academic competence, understanding of multiple cultures, and the ability to problem solve. But that comes from developing respect and rapport first, and we earn that right to demand the rigor through doing that prior work. Again, referencing something that we have at RCOE VAPA that's on the website and is free. There are 4 units that are developed really for middle high school that feature 4 artists, 2 male, 2 female, 4 different cultures. There's an arts history component, a culminating art project, and it uses visual thinking strategies, which is a whole nother webinar that I think Allison Huntsman and I are going to develop a little bit down the line. But that's an example of some work that was, some lesson plan that was thoughtfully done, taking in diversity and multicultures. So in summary, again, I want you to invite you to think of this as a lens for your work of CRT. And the high points or the highlights are recognizing and celebrating the diversity of our students so they can really engage with us most effectively. And that we're going to strive to maintain rigor in teaching the arts. We are not going to make anything less than or easier. We want the same rigor and high standards for everybody. So again, now that you've seen a little bit of the pedagogy and we've broken it down, take 1 minute to think about something that you're currently doing in your classroom to really engage that cultural relevancy. And like I said, if you're an administrator overseeing programs, where are you seeing that in your work? And I'll set the timer and we'll share out what we're doing presently. Because I am certain that everyone is doing it to some degree. Okay, 10 seconds. Okay, go ahead and press send, please. Excited to hear what you have to say. Okay, let's see. Try to get my mouse to work so I can scroll down here. Black History Month and Women's History Month from Rachel. Farm to table use of cultural foods, Carolina. Storytelling songs from Lizzie. That's interesting. Jennifer says I featured cultures each month and have parents come in. Great way to tie parents in. Greg in Moreno Valley, we strive to provide Spanish translations. Excellent. Phyllis, designing cross-cultural experiences. Dismantle barriers. We're going to talk about barriers in the next pedagogy. Excellent. Barbara overseeing BAM for middle school Boys at Promise. Lenore has work created by artists from all types of cultures. Yeah, we used to really, and I'm guilty of this, really feature certain artists, and it wasn't very diverse. And I had to move off of that myself. It's been 5 or 6 years now, really looking for artists that represent diversity and our students. Black artists. Oh, good. Faith Ringgold, yeah, is a wonderful artist to feature. Anthony, using modern day artists. Dan, giving students a chance to listen to music. Oh, interesting. Share where they may have heard from it, normalizing that. That's very thoughtful response, normalizing that. National Days of the Year from Anthony, social justice art. And from Firuze, and you can correct me if I'm saying that incorrectly. Okay, so there's lots of great ideas in this group, and I can see that you are effectively working with cultural relevancy and making really thoughtful choices for your students. That's excellent. Okay, so here's our final acronym, UDL, Universal Design for Learning. And this approach is really about flexibility in the way students can access the material, engage with it, and then show us what they know. And so we're really about removing barriers for students. And when we're making this work for a classroom, oftentimes this really makes it work for students who are having a hard time accessing the material because we've done some thoughtful lesson design. So again, that term, removing barriers for the greatest amount of success, for the greatest possible portion of our students. We want the environment to be inclusive, and we want to minimize barriers around materials or types of activities, methods of assessment. And quite honestly, it requires much more work on our part, but this isn't something to be done overnight. It's something that over time we get more fluent at and we're able to incorporate into our daily teaching. So here's just to give you an example, a sample lesson as promised. So we're doing a lesson, an art lesson on Georgia O'Keeffe in space, and they're going to be able to explain how she used it in her works and focusing on small details. So that's kind of the setup and the objective for the lesson. So the first thing that we want to consider is multiple means of representation. And I like to kind of translate or do my version of it. So my version is in green, teachers presenting to students. So I could do that a couple of different ways. I could provide large print typed instructions, instructions on the board, repeating the goals with partners. I could project a large image. I could have a handout of the image. I could have real poppies or plastic poppies for the students to feel. So there's a couple of different ways that I could present to students instead of one traditional way. Okay, so that's the first piece. Then I get into multiple means of expression. So translated in my version, students showing you what they know. How are they allowed to do that? So students could recreate a flower using the medium that suits their needs. Or you could set up stations to do 2D or 3D. Or we could have watercolor. Or we could have construction paper and do paper collage. So again, multiple ways for students showing what they know. And please don't be overwhelmed by so many examples because you might not start out like that and it's not for every single lesson. But there are times with, given the time and the wherewithal, that you can provide multiple means of expression. And then the third aspect of this is multiple means of engagement. So translated to students motivated about the learning. So can they work with support from a buddy? Can they do some copying and altering, incorporating how they think and feel, concluding with students going, and I'm sure most of you do this, do a gallery walk and discussing each other's work. So in each of those three categories that I just covered, you see the word multiple happening. So multiple means of representation, expression, and engagement. Again, just throwing out our CMU resource, Equity Arts Study has lessons that are suitable for secondary that are focused on the arts, and they have lots of choices in terms of students showing you what they've learned, as well as being culturally relevant. But the lens here is trying to remove the barrier, trying to give access. And so you'll hear UDL talked a lot about in terms of choice and voice. So choices in how they're learning, and then their voice involved in the learning. So as I have said now 3 times, because I just want to reiterate it, multiple means of teaching the lesson, letting students show you what they know, and letting them become engaged in a way that's really comfortable for them. So again, Chat Waterfall, you guys have had amazing feedback on what you're doing in your own classrooms. Please take 1 minute to share something that you recognize that you're doing around UDL for your arts class. I think it's really helpful to see what other people are doing. And of course, there's probably music teachers in the room, art teachers in the room, and so on. It's going to look a little bit different depending on what you're teaching. And administrators, where do you see UDL in what you're doing? Okay, that is our 1 minute. So please go ahead and press send and share with us some of your UDL strategies. Integration, artist in residence, multiple modalities, embodying vocabulary words. That's interesting, Phyllis. Peruse, choice of medium, great. Miss Houston. Oops, it went by me. Choice boards. That's a good one, Allison. Rachel, digital drawing or traditional pencil. Gina, block design to retell a familiar story. That's a great strategy. I love that. When we dance, we have different ways of doing that. Wonderful. Design challenges. That sounds interesting, Anthony. Wow. And really out of these 3 acronyms I presented, this one is the most in-depth and takes a lot of planning and a lot of work, allows students to redo work from Lenore. Great, do the refining. Excellent examples, everybody. Okay, the final lesson example that I want to share with you, just throw out there as an idea, is around the song Strange Fruit. And so you could come at this from a variety of different ways. And I want to share with you that this is a song that was written in 1937, and I have highlighted the songwriter. So there's a whole piece around that that could be researched. And it tells, it's a dark song about lynching of African Americans in the South during Jim Crow. And the lyrics are quite intense. And it was sung by Billie Holiday, and you might know that there's a current movie about her life that I haven't seen yet, but it's featuring Andrew Day, and it's supposed to be excellent. But she picked up the song and was performing it, and it was very detrimental to her career. She received, threats and canceled recordings and canceled engagements. But it was really, really important to her, the social justice of that she portrayed the song. And if you look at the lyrics, some people are really tuned into lyrics. I know, when my husband listens to a song, he notices everything. He's really paying attention to the meaning. And I kind of, tra-la-la, and I like the melody, and I'm not as in tune with the lyrics as he is. But if you look at this, this is really intense. And she was committed to sharing it with the world. And I'm going to stop share, and I'm going to pull up her, let's see, her recording of this, so you can see it if you are not familiar. And let's watch this all the way through.
Southern trees bear strange fruit, blood on the leaves and blood at the root, black bodies swinging in the southern breeze, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees. Pastoral scene of the gallant South, the bulging eyes and the twisted mouth, scent of magnolia, sweet and fresh. Then the sudden smell of burning flesh. Here is a fruit for the crows to pluck, for the rain to gather, for the wind to suck, for the sun to rock, for the tree to drop. Here is a strange and bitter cry.
Let me put there we go. So that is quite a powerful performance. I'm sure you'll agree. And that is the link that I used. I jump out of the PowerPoint because it doesn't always work well for me. But if you think about this particular piece of art and this artist as a centerpiece for a lesson, and you went on to have students, how can we extend this activity to have students respond to the history, the culture, the emotion, the artwork, giving them choice to use their voice. You can see how there's a lot there that we can do with the pedagogies that we've just learned about. It's very rich in being able to incorporate all of those capacities. So just reflecting on what we've walked through together today. You have SEL, which is busy promoting health and well-being for us and our students. So using emotion to create and respond to art, and self-expression as the key to being well. And actually that, watching Billie Holiday perform that song, it's very emotional for me to even watch that. And certainly as a performer, she's fully engaged with her emotions in performing. With CRT, we're respecting multiple cultures because the arts are there in every culture. And as teachers, we can access that for our students. We can teach and celebrate so much. And it's really incredible for us in the arts versus other content areas. We really have that access like nobody else. And then, of course, including all learners, UDL, by making the effort to have more choices for our students, we help them to be successful. We take away barriers and we help them all to be successful. And of course, that's what we all ultimately want as teachers. I put in some books for further research or further study. The things that I cited in this talk came from these 3 books that I have on my shelf, and I recommend them all. So Permission to Feel by Dr. Brackett. I reference Culturally Responsive Teaching. I'll have to fix that, by Zaretta Hammond. And then UDL Now by Katie Novak, which is a current book. And I have my own acronym for the arts, All Ready to Succeed. So I figured I had to learn so many over the years that it was time for me to come up with my own. So it's the one I enjoy. And that's it. We went through that pretty quickly, but I'm happy to stay on and chat with you if you want to unmute yourself and ask questions. Or I invite you to go back and look in the chat because there was some really interesting ideas presented there. And if you had any commentary about the last lesson, the strange fruit, and how that fit in with our 3 acronyms, that would be great. So this recording will be up on the arts webinar page in about 2 weeks time after I've had a chance to transcribe it, because we do that for all of our webinars. And I thank you very much for your time, and I encourage you to use these pedagogies in your work. Don't think of them as something that binds you. Think of them as lenses that you keep front of mind as you're planning, and then they guide and direct us in really unexpected ways, and you get more fluent with it over time. So I appreciate you taking the time to be here with us, and I'll hang out. Thank you.